Page 161, Western Tanager. Page 161, Scarlet Tanager.
So what we just listened to was actually a collection of bird songs from the Cornell University Lab of Ornithology and Macaulay Library from a vinyl record that dates back to the 1960s, the late 1960s that we have in our collection.
So this is the beginning, is this record, but of course the ecological context of birdsong is something that we are researching as we develop the project. And two sources that inspire us or that we've been diving into that will be quite familiar to this audience, we've heard these names already a few times today. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, who brings to our attention that the presence or absence of birds and their calls can tell us something about the effects of certain human interventions on the environment. And so even in 1962, birds being very much connected to this relationship between technology that humans are developing and the effect on our soundscape. And Bernie Krause, of course, who tells us that when certain frequency bands in a natural soundscape spectrum are masked by human or machine-made noises, species communicating in those frequency ranges usually die out, or evolve. And I think perhaps it's this last one, this idea of evolve, that we are interested in this speculative scenario. So what might our soundscape sound like as birds change their migration patterns, or habitats change in terms of what kind of food they offer? So what kind of soundscape will we live in? Also, I think that Anna Lowenhaupt-Singh, with this idea of multi-species environments and writings around multi-species relationships, are something that we are looking into as we develop the project further.
And here we are especially wondering, and Jay will talk to us in just a second about the development of the artificial intelligence system behind this project. We're wondering, could we actually abstract some of these ideas into variables for the creation of data sets or the creation of training data for the artificial intelligence system that could help us imagine future bird calls in a very speculative sense. So I think with this we turn it over to Jay. Oh no, sorry, we have one more slide here. I'm sorry. Yes.
Before we turn it over to Jay, we would like to say a few words about the speculative context for this work. And so here, some of you may know the work of Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby, who work very much in speculative design. And in their work, Speculative Everything, Design, Fiction, and Social Dreaming, they lean on the work of Joseph Boros to talk about this cone of possibilities. So you see that it begins on the left with our present moment, and then moves outward in a cone shape to possible futures, plausible futures, probable futures, and preferable futures. And this idea of where the blue is and where the gray is sort of where we want to be, because the outer cone is the world of science fiction. It's really the imagined, completely imagined. And as you shrink in a little bit further, what you're looking at is something that is possible, but not necessarily, it must not happen, but it could happen. And they work in this realm of the preferable, where they're trying to think about a future that they want or that we want. And we're playing, I think, in the blue space and the gray space there. In fact, what we're interested in is more how people perceive what a possible future is, rather than giving it already a weight of whether it's preferable or not. First, we want to try and create that experience. I want to say one more thing. I think the next time we do this, we want to adjust this cone, because one critique that we have of it is that it starts in the present and looks forward, but it doesn't take history into account. And I think there's a reverse cone that actually feeds into the present. And I think that something like Afrofuturism that also talks about a technological future but never forgets the past is something that we want to take into consideration in this project as well. So an adapted cone coming soon.
Moves outward in a cone shape to possible.
And now, we would like to turn it over to our colleague, Jay, who in the initial stage of the project implemented a machine learning algorithm to synthesize bird songs, especially in the family Cardinalidae. Cardinals are very much part of our soundscape in Indiana. Whenever I hear a cardinal, I will always think of Indiana. I come from California. We did not have cardinals in California, and so they, for me, really signify this place-based knowledge, this soundscape that is very tied to particular places. And with that, Jay, it's all you. We are on slide 10. So Jay is not hearing anything, and she's wondering if she will be heard if she starts. We are, okay. Oh, Jay, if you need to unmute, so let me just tell her.
Oh, now I can hear.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so we have it queued up to slide 10 for you.
Sure. Okay. Hello, this is Jay. I'll walk through methodology for this project today. So today, to create AI-generated bird sound of cardinality, we implemented machine learning algorithm. This algorithm that we implemented in this project is based on generative adversarial networks, aka GAN. So recently, GAN have gained popularity for a wide range of generated output, such as AI-created images, audio, and text. So let's briefly talk about how this GAN works. So inside the GAN, there are actually two models, one generator, and then the other one is discriminator. So we may call generator as an artist and discriminator as a critic. So the generator artist get random noise as an initial idea and try to make a realistic bird song sample. And the discriminator determine whether the generator sample is realistic or not, comparing it to real bird song sample. Then discriminator gives feedback to generator, showing that how the generator sample is far from the real bird song sample. Then generator goes back again from the beginning and repeats making another sample while minimizing the generator loss. So then at some point, the discriminator cannot differentiate if the generator's output is real or not, then the discriminator loss goes up. So that's why the part of this algorithm name is adversarial. So next slide, please. So that's why the part of this algorithm name is adversarial. Sure. To train this algorithm, first we needed to build a data set. So about 4,700 cardinality bird songs were collected from Zeno-Canto community, which publicly shares wildlife sound across the globe. So, and the cardinality family include tanagers, grosbeak, cardinals, and buntings. The reason we chose, we explored the cardinality was to secure more data instances within the same bird family and to bring more meaningful results for this initial state. Okay, next slide, please. So, So we start using the GAN algorithm based on the cardinality of our sum. Specifically, we implemented WaveGAN, which is one of the most popular, GAN algorithm that learns to synthesize audio data. So generally speaking, before training, the real bird song audios, which is the training data set, undergo pre-processing to fit the appropriate format for the WaveGAN. So in this process, we converted MP3 file to WAV format, and any multi-channel stereos were adjusted to single channel. And then in training, we trained the WaveGAN following the structure that we reviewed previously. And next, with sound generation stage, the trained generator now becomes ready to generate a realistic sound. So with the random inputs starting from there, the model produces machine-generated bird songs. So we'll explore this sample in the next slide. Realistic sound. So with the random inputs starting from there, the model produces machine-generated bird songs. So we'll explore this sample in the next slide.
WaveGAN. In comparison, we would like to start playing you a sound sample from the Xeno database that is of a scarlet tanager that we also heard already from the 1960s, recorded on the vinyl LP. So this is the sound sample now from the contemporary Xeno Canto database, recorded in 2018 by Thomas Ryder Payne in Toronto, Canada. And then in comparison to the sound are the first samples from Jay's application of the WaveGAN artificial intelligence system. The first following sample is a composite of 3 different bird calls that she synthesized. And then the last sample on the very right of the screen is a compilation of a 7-second sample generated from WaveGAN. And here we just want to pause for a little bit and provide a discussion of these individual samples, what we hear in them and why we find them interesting already as the very initial phase of the project is going on. Clearly in the last sample that we heard, we hear this transition from something that sounds actually quite natural and realistic in the beginning as a bird song to something that becomes very, very technological. And this is definitely a direction that we would like to explore in future sounds that we generate in terms of a balance that we'd like to create between this technological world of the artificial intelligence system and then the natural sounding bird calls that are created in that system as well.
Maybe this is a great place to say just a couple of words about collaboration as well. So these first samples are really important for establishing our working relationship. It's important to us that it's really all fingerprints are shaping this project. So Jay's perception of what we are hearing and our perception of what we are hearing. And so we use these samples as a way to have conversation, to try and understand what is interesting from the technological perspective. And when Jay talks to us about what she hears and what is interesting for her, for the kind of work she's interested in, we try to retain that in the project, as well as for us artistically to try and push further what we find is interesting. And so each sample collection that is produced gives us an opportunity to revisit that and to interact collectively with the AI. And then Jay, I don't know if you wanted to say something as a from your perspective in developing the algorithm, what you hear in these samples or how you approach them.
So, for the example too, like I don't hear much about machine learning, machine sound, but in the example 3, like I hear like a lot of machine sound, like some part. So for me, from a technology perspective, hearing machine sound, like for example, from AI generated bird song is a failure because we train the machine to make the realistic sound as much as it can. So the more realistic sound, the better result for technology perspective. But um, yeah, artistically maybe I don't know, have a different perspective. Could be more interesting another way.
Exactly. And so this allows us, again, to negotiate some of those. Where's that place on the cone? You might even have one for realism as well, whether we want to be more real or less real in our sounds.
All right, and to wrap it up, just a quick look into the future where we are planning to go with this project. We eventually imagine a physical format for distribution of these curated bird calls and bird songs that we're generating in form of a selection pressed on vinyl records so that we reference that original older technological medium, which would also give us an opportunity to complement and contextualize the recordings on this vinyl record through cover artwork. We're in conversation with one of our colleagues in the printmaking department at Purdue University, and then also liner notes here, exchanging ideas with our colleagues in the humanities at Purdue University. We have already a digital format of the first experiments that you can listen to on SoundCloud, and we provide the link right here, soundcloud.com studio-McMullen_Winkler. And we plan to stock this with new upcoming sound recordings and sound-generated sounds. And then there's also a forthcoming article in a special issue of Traditions, Innovations in Arts Design and Media and Higher Education, which is published in association with A2RU, the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities. We're very excited about this publication that's coming up in the fall with the title of this presentation, Common Bird Songs for an Uncommon Climate, which is a collaborative writing effort between all three of us, Shannon, Jay, and myself. All right, with that, we're on our last slide. Please let us know any questions, any suggestions you might have. You can get into touch with us. Have our email address on this slide, and then also the website of some of our other works at gardensandmachines.com. So we welcome any questions at this point. Thank you very much. Yes, so in a nutshell, some of the discussion we already introduced a little bit on this one slide with the first couple of results that we shared today, where we try to approach it from both technological and artistic perspectives. So things that might be considered a technological failure, for example, might be actually rather interesting from an artistic point of view, especially in a situation where we hear the technology come through, so that we don't try to recreate a one-to-one copy of something that sounds natural per se, but we want to strike a balance between these more technological aesthetics and more realistic aesthetics as well.
I think this is a good question. It's early days in the project, and so I think we're trying to find some of the ways that this will stick. So the next step, I don't think we mentioned, is that we want to populate the algorithm with more than one bird voice so that we get a more multivocal kind of environment. And I think we're looking for the moment when we hear something that sounds more like a soundscape, something that is somewhat familiar, but also that the AI remains a part of the conversation through the technological.
And we have to mention possibly one technological shortcoming or limitation that we have at the moment, we can only generate samples of a length of 1 second. And so we have to stitch them together right now in order to create longer bird calls. And so, for example, certain elements of a melody or a rhythm that we might hear in natural birds that could actually develop in a quite interesting direction with the help of technology. We don't hear that yet in our samples, and so we definitely want to push beyond the 1 second barrier. This is a limitation of waveGAN, but we had some discussions also with Jay, and hopefully with time and some more resources, we can break through that barrier. This will pose a much more difficult computer science problem, and we're working on addressing that as well.
You can't see Jay now, but she's nodding her head. This is like, if I understand correctly, this is a good challenge. Jay is quite happy about the fact that this gives her something novel to work on with waveGAN. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very... Oh, nice. That's always good to know. But yeah, thank you for this suggestion. We definitely will take a look at that. Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah, we ran into this. I just think it's interesting. We ran into this problem a while back ago with a project that was about computer vision, this very same thing, that foreground, background is something that machines don't see very well, and trying to leverage that. But I don't know, Jay, did you want to say something about that? Did you hear the question?
Sorry, I couldn't hear much from my side.
So the question was about discerning what are actual bird sounds versus what might be background sounds in the database, and how the algorithm would handle sorting through these sounds, or the way that the database actually that you have curated deals with this issue. It's just bird
So to enhance the accuracy, we try to collect the like a bird songs from within the same family. That's the one thing, and then we are not quite sure in these days that how machine collect the features from each data. So machine sometimes collect more feature than we thought. That's why I start creating some unexpected output, like a result. So but in all machine learning algorithm, they try to mimic the real data by minimizing their loss function. So most of the machine learning neural network comes with the loss function. So while they are repeating the training process, they compare the result that generated by machine and then the real sample, and then they compute the difference, and then they try to minimize that. So that's the the default machine learning, the way they handle the trying to be close to the real data sample. Did I answer the question? Well,
Yeah, and I think there's a technological answer like that, but we were also discussing some very simple analog strategies in terms of the curation of the training data sets, for example. So should we, for example, deliberately introduce human noises and human sounds into those training data sets so that we deliberately trick, to a certain extent, the machine learning algorithm so that these sounds do become part of the acoustic environment, the speculative acoustic environment? Or should we stick only to bird songs and then, for example, do a curation that's more based on future migratory patterns, how they might change, and an overlap of habitats of birds that are not yet in the same climate zone, for example, but that may well be in the next 20, 30 years?
yeah. So interestingly, we'll know the result because, like, as far as I understand, that we still don't know how this machine learning algorithm extract the feature from the low data. So we might try to see how it works. So includes all those layers in the data set, like human noises, environmental noises, real world noises, and we give that data, or we deliberately separate those layers and insert just only bird call to the machine, and then we will need to compare those two different output at the end.
Yes, please.
Mm.
Yes, so the final sample might not have cardinals in it at all. Yeah, that's totally possible. And in fact, we're looking into projects that map and predict what is happening with birds. We just found a mapping project by Audubon that looks at what happens with 1.5 degrees warming, with 2.0 degrees warming, and more. And so as we find more of that data, then certainly it will change. And we may have, we were just in Colombia, so we might have what is in Colombia actually sounding for Indiana. Yeah. Oh, that gave two more questions. Yeah, please. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we envision, and I wonder if you're speaking or trying to address the aesthetic quality of the sounds that we envision to result from a system like this. I mean, we definitely try to strike this balance of something that sounds oddly familiar, but that's yet strangely different from what we hear in the environment. And so that's where I think we need more time with the machine learning algorithm, with the artificial intelligence system, with longer samples than the 1 second samples that we have. So we're in the very early initial stages of this project, but we definitely try to walk that narrow line of something that is, oddly familiar, but then also very strange at the same time.
I think the second. Yeah. 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 The forums would. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So I think we imagine for this first phase the vinyl record, because the vinyl record can be something that's played in a public space. You can listen socially, but you can also be very immersed in this sound. And that is, again, sort of making this historical connection to the way that we have tried
do think that we are envisioning, in some sense, an installation, an immersive kind of space that what exactly that will look like and what the visuals will be in there, I don't know, but there definitely a kind of installation is where we're headed. Yeah. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
In respect to the next speech, I would have the wish that you could perhaps discuss afterwards. It is very interesting field, and I think is it okay for you? Thank you. And from the future, we are now back, I think, in the present with Amina Bogen. Originally studied environment science and energy science in ETH Zurich. After completion of her PhD in energy economics and policies, she studied part-time in the MA Transdisciplinary Studies at the Zurigo University of the Arts. Currently, she works as an environmental economist focusing on individual behavior change at the Zurich University of Applied Science. She is also an artist, researcher working in design, and in her transdisciplinary project, she investigates the sensory perception of energy infrastructure in alpine landscapes using artistic and performative approaches. Since the end of 2020, she is also an associate researcher at the Institute Culture of the Alps. I introduce Amina Bogen.
Before I start, maybe you clap.
Thank you. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
the view into the future.
So I'm a Mac person. I have no clue how can I make this full screen. Yeah. Not yet. Not really. No. Well, maybe I just have to work with this. So, is it okay for you if I do it like this? Okay. Then thank you very much for the kind introduction. As you already mentioned, I have kind of several hats. So originally I'm an environmental economist and my PhD was in economics. But then afterwards I started an MA, or I did an MA in transdisciplinary research. So I'm also a transdisciplinary researcher working with sound. And then I also have like a third hat, but you will see that at the end of the presentation. Okay, so because I'm an economist, I have to bore you a bit with like a statistical graph. I'll promise it's the only one. It might come back, but it's the only one. So this is about the electricity production in Switzerland, the statistics in the last 70 years. And we're going to also look a bit back in the past, but what it's really interesting to see is like the blue part. So the blue part is a large part, especially in the beginning in the 1950s. Electricity was produced with hydropower, different kinds of hydropower. So Switzerland is a country of hydropower plants. Yes, and so the Alps itself, they are landscapes which are characterized by a tourist image as an anti-urban idyll, but there are also spaces that are used diversely, well, by hydropower plants, but also by tourism, agriculture, and other uses. So, getting back to electricity production. Electricity production itself, I mean, the electricity is not visible, but what we can see is the infrastructure, meaning that the production itself has some kind of material echoes in our landscapes, and it changes landscapes very much. And this was, especially in the 1950s, when there was quite a boom of hydropower plant production was booming after the World War. So this was in conflict with preservation of landscapes. And it's still nowadays coming up again as a conflict. And I'll also talk about the future or energy futures in the second part. So the first part is actually a project that lies in the past, and the second part will be like a future project. And this next slide, I think I don't have to say much here at the FKL symposium. For you, it's all clear that kind of landscape is always sensory, it's always experiential, and it always has some embodied knowledge. And of course, as well, because it's a sound conference, I don't have to say that landscape is not only visual, it's always other senses too. So we have to move the aesthetics beyond the visual. But in my work, I also use kind of sound and listening practice as a critical approach, critical for a lot of dichotomies like nature, culture, noise, silence, and also the mind and body thing that a lot of researchers are thinking in. And taking this critical approach, I say that what I was doing is more a performative research than like a classical research. I'm coming back to the performative research in a minute. So this is the project that I was doing in between 2018. Yeah, it started 17 in my mind already, between 2018 and 2020. The project was called Operation Beton, and it was a transdisciplinary and performative research project where I was working with 26 hydrodams in the Swiss Alps. So I actually did several field trips, or 27 field trips to these dams, and I did field observations. Those field observations could go from 1 hour, for example, to 1 week. So one hydrodam I kind of observed over 1 week. I went back every day and visited the dam. So coming back now to this performative research approach. So myself, I'm coming from economics and doing quantitative work using data. But this performative research approach is something in between, or it's a third research branch, which is not quantitative and it's also not qualitative research. It's very much practice-driven, and it's all about the enthusiastic of doing practice. And this is what I did. I really loved going to these hydrodams and visiting them weekly. What else? Performative research itself says that it's not objective or neutral. It's always affected and embodied. And the researcher itself is not stable, or it's not a stable variable throughout the research project. So also the researcher itself changes with emerging into the process. The researcher, or me, I became very much entangled, and I was always in becoming with these hydro dams. So it was not me observing the hydro dams, being there, but it was I was also observed, and so on. Within these 3 years, that was very much a process. For my research trips were very much unstructured in the beginning. I also mainly collected images in the beginning, started being with the dams. Then it became a bit more structured, but of course not too structured. I developed then a field protocol to be a bit more structured, but mainly I collected material, and this material shifted from being visually focused to auditory focused. So then, kind of the outcomes of this project, I also want to say that performative research kind of tries to be a bit different than just writing classical research papers. And the manifesto of performative research from Hasemann says, in their insistence that research outputs and finding must be made through the symbolic language and forms of their practice. So the findings are not translated into numbers, so not like statistics or words, but uses other means. The persistence on reporting research findings through the material form of practice contests traditional ways of representing knowledge claims. So in this project, Operation Beton, I used the audio material in order to create an assemblage, and I printed it also on a vinyl record, which I call, or the form I call, it's a non-scientific synthesis report. It includes, of course, this assemblage from the field recordings, but on the back side it also had kind of a text part, like a brochure, but which wasn't really classical because it was folded like this. So if you want to read it, you have to open it. That's easy, but you have to close it back down, which is very time-consuming because you have to do it like going back down of a mountain. And then as well, this is way more classic. I also published a book chapter in this very nice book, Résonance, which was co-edited by Nelly Valsang-Giacomo and was recently published. The book itself is in French, but my French is not good enough for a book chapter, so I originally wrote it in English. So if someone wants to read it not in French, but in English, just come and ask me. Yes. Then when that kind of project was finished, or not, I mean, I never thought it's finished, but kind of had an end with this vinyl record, I was going back to more traditional research in energy economics and behavioral economics. But then kind of this research never kind of left me. It was always with me. So I started looking into more research literature in my traditional field, so the energy social science studies. And they kind of use a concept called social acceptance in order to look at how people relate to energy infrastructures in landscape. And I read a lot of that literature, and I mean, it's nice literature to read, but I started like thinking about it a bit more critical. Those literature or those studies, they use mostly standardized surveys, and we all know that standardized survey can deliver some results, but are never open to things that are not within the survey questions itself. And then as well, I mean, there is also more critical literature on this social acceptance approach that says that this approach is a normative top-down perspective, so a top-down perspective from the government. It was used to create for governments in order to say that something is socially acceptable to build hydropower plants and so on. And the other thing is that acceptance is always a passive. I don't want to say emotion, because acceptance, I wouldn't say it's an emotion, but it's always passive. So then the literature, or this Butler et al., they say that we also need to engage and look into other kind of things like support, resistance, uncertainty, and many other emotions around this energy infrastructure. And then myself, I would also kind of hypothesize that transdisciplinary approaches are very much needed here. And of course, we need to use sensory perception for those issues, and then also talk about sensory perception. Now, why this is still sticking with me is, or this issue, or this research is still sticking with me, is that this is currently, at least in Switzerland, this is really relevant at the moment. Now here my statistical graph is back. So at least in Switzerland, there are 3 things happening today or in the future. So we have this yellow part. So if you cannot read it, the yellow part is the nuclear power plants. And in Germany, it's way faster than in Switzerland, but in Switzerland, we also plan to shut down the nuclear power plants at some point in the future time, the near future. And this kind of electricity we have to replace by something else. And this is the green part, which is very much at the bottom, which means it's renewable in the sense of wind or solar energy. And then the third thing is that with climate change and the decarbonization plans, there is also a total increase that should happen in order, for example, that we can switch mobility from fossil fuel-based energy to renewables. So this means this is really an urgent topic at the moment, how we want to deal with energy production. Because if we want to produce more renewable energy, this has to go somewhere. So then in Switzerland, since the last autumn or winter, there's a huge political discussion on what we want to do, and the government actually plans to give out lots of subsidies for the things on the left, so for solar power plants in the Alps. And the idea is that because they're in the mountain high up, they can also produce electricity in the winter when in the Midlands we don't have any sun. This is also a seasonal aspect why the Alps are really important for that question. And then as well, wind production is, or the wind is there in Switzerland during winter times. So that's why, like, thinking about alpine energy futures now is really important. Yes. Then, but in order to really think about the futures, the energy futures in Switzerland or in other alpine regions, I think we have to take a step back and think about how could we how could we see or sense such futures. And I think Julia this morning already mentioned Amitav Ghosh in a similar way. The Indian writer, he said that like climate crisis itself is a crisis of imagination. So we really need to think about how we can imagine futures and how we want to imagine them, and really developing aesthetic competencies is an important task for the near future. So that's why I ask really the question, can you imagine the year 2050 in a Swiss village in the Alps? You could be a tourist, for example, and how would kind of the landscape around you sound like, smell like, and look like, and also taste like? So how could you really relate to that landscape of tomorrow? And that's why I think really at these energy futures there must be getting more tangible and also more perceptible to lots of people in Switzerland. Yes, and I'm coming kind of to the future work that I'm planning to do, and I'm really awaiting research proposal outcome or an answer from a funding body to actually do that, and it should be coming in the next few days. I'm really nervous. What I want to do is to design and test participatory field workshops where I invite kind of diverse audience, may it be like people really living in these villages and also kind of people from the local utilities and so on for these workshops where we kind of together do a multisensory perception workshop. I will of course start with hearing. And the idea is that to offer people a new and transformative perspective. So in order they can discuss and imagine in a new way. And I think I could create a space for engagement in order to co-produce knowledges and visions. But of course, the energy transformation will not be happening just because of those workshops. It's just one tool I think could be very powerful. Yes, and then I hope I still have 1 minute left, and I'm changing again a hat to my third hat. So this might be not interesting for all of you, but at least for those in Switzerland. My third hat is that I'm also a president of a new association. So we founded the Swiss Society for Acoustic Ecology like half a year ago. And if you're interested in that, we just published our website. Go to this link and look what we are doing there. So with this, I'm finished. Yeah, I think I would describe the fieldwork I did actually somehow as ethnographic, but including non-humans. So of course I was like talking to humans. I was also talking to people working in these hydro dams, but not in a systematic way. So I think this is one part that could be still be included in the future, working more with those methods and with humans being there. So also these workshops, of course, are going to be more in this direction, true. But for that project, I think kind of was more interested in the non-human part of those observations I did. But yeah, of course, I mean, maybe I can show you the links. So if you want to actually listen to the vinyl record, you can listen on it on Bandcamp, and you will find that, of course, there's human noises or voices in the recording. So it's not there, but it's, yeah, could have been more ethnographic. Mm-hmm. True. Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah. so the transdisciplinary part, I think it's a really nice word, but it's also, I have a hassle with it because what I studied was transdisciplinary in the arts. And there's kind of lots of definition what is transdisciplinary. And for me itself, within this project, it was the transdisciplinary part was kind of mingling together my traditional research understanding, but then also kind of using artistic methods, kind of coming together, intermingling. But then, of course, transdisciplinary approaches also mean working with other kind of knowledges which are not coming from research. And that could be with kind of people living there, for example. Yeah. Yeah. I think it goes in a similar direction, yeah. I think in Canada that's what you use, but I'm not completely sure if it's completely the same or it's just like interrelated. I have, yeah, I have produced this vinyl record, which is kind of the outcome, which is a non-scientific outcome of the research. True. But I mean, there's the manifesto of performative research from Haseman. I think this is really a good article to get into what is performative research. But I think it's really much interrelated to action création, it's called, right? Yeah. Recherche action, yeah. Thank you.
Justina. The auditory is very interested, and we are here to hear your.
Okay, hello.
And you are on air, and with the help of our technique, we come together. First, some remarks to your bio. Adjunct at the Faculty of International Political Studies, University of Łódź in Poland, member of the editorial collective of Ensemble, Contemporary Music and Sound Studies magazine, member of the Scientific Board of Interdisciplinary Center of Urban Studies. The current research activities concentrate on urban soundscape politics and policy. Currently, you carry out the research project on public value on the soundscape of post-industrial cities, for example, Lodge, Tampere, and Manchester. You had been involved in collaboration with researchers from the area of media studies, philosophy, and anthropology in educational activities, concentrating on the popularization of conscious, multidisciplinary, and active listening. And last but not least, you graduated from School of Music and Classical Piano Performance, and you are still heavily influenced by the power, beauty, and multifaceted nature of this wonderful instrument. I hope you can understand the English introduction. You are on air.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I hope that you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. So, so I will go through my presentation. I hope that I will manage within 20 minutes.
So this presentation revolves around the experience with a series of educational activities, part of them being carried out at the University of Łódź, part of them being a component of the research projects and popularization projects that you mentioned. What was of interest for me was how applying of self-reported soundscape assessment protocols influences the listening perspective of the participants. So my points of departure were how people listen when they are instructed, whether it influences their listening experience because the protocols have changed over time, and to what extent the instruction of listening can be a source of creative process for the participants. We had a series of listening situations. There were sound walks that were carried out in Łódź as a part of the project that you mentioned, and also sound walks that were carried out in Lublin, a wonderful city in the east part of Poland, within the project Dźwiękownia Sound Lab. That was the initiative of the local institution of culture within the structures of the city hall, and with the collaboration of the University of Lublin. I had the opportunity to involve students from two departments at my university, from the Faculty of International Political Studies, where I work, and from the Institute of Contemporary Culture. The participants didn't have a prior experience with soundworks and in general with sound studies, acoustic ecology, conscious listening, deep listening. So those concepts were introduced during classes, and a part of classes was carried out as a sort of field research and field listening. I had also a great pleasure and a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with the musician, composer, and philosopher Rafał Mazur within the series of the concerts of deep listening, where the protocols of soundscape assessment were also distributed among the participants. So after the concert of deep listening, where the headphones were made available to the participants also structured their experience through the protocol. And this project was carried out in Nowa Huta. Now it is a part of Krakow city. In the past, it was the separate city with the clearly post-industrial vibe. As for the methodology of the protocols, they were heavily influenced by the current studies in soundscape that are mainly developed by the acousticians. So they were strongly structurized in order to make them feasible for the participants, so that they can grasp the idea behind the protocol within several minutes. The students' protocols were a little bit longer, because the students had the opportunity to learn about some concepts and theories underpinning acoustic ecology and soundscape assessment. So they got instructed on the selection of the route and the listening mode, the active listening mode. They were to categorize the sounds based on the proposal by Solomon, Jacobi, and Bello. There was a longer version of the semantic differential than it was used in the case of the protocols used for the people from the open recruitment for the general population, and the Likert scale for attributes of soundscape according to Swedish soundscape quality protocol. The shorter version that was distributed during the field research in Łódź, and also that was used in the soundscape in Lublin and in and soundworks in Lublin and in the deep listening concerts in Nowa Huta, it was adjusted version based on soundscape indices project that is currently on the way. So there were Likert scale questions regarding familiarity with the place, the frequency of visits in the place, the willingness to stay longer, come back again, the acoustic features, the categories of sounds, but less complicated than the full version of the taxonomy of the urban sounds, and also semantic attributes based on the Swedish Soundscape Quality Protocol. Additionally, as it is recommended in ISO standard for the soundscape assessment, there were some questions regarding the emotional perception of the place with self-assessment mannequin scale for pleasure, arousal, and dominance. But today I wouldn't like to talk about the quantitative results of the study, because actually they are very much in line with what we can find in literature. With the preferences for the sounds of nature, the sounds of flowing water, so they are very much in line also with the suggestions for good soundscape design by Alan Lex Brown. I would like to talk about the responses to the entire listening situation from the participants. So the protocols, the instruction for analyzing soundscape can be treated as the framework for listening if we take the positive approach, or if we evaluate this approach negatively as something that sets boundaries for listening, as something that violates my freedom of listening. And actually I got those two reactions. So the first one you can see on the slide. I would say that the sound walk has become the whole new experience for me. I paid attention to the things that I usually ignore. Sounds of my steps, sounds of my breathing. And the second type of reaction, I feel uncomfortable when after an active concert like listening situation, I have to somehow measure my experience. So if I were to evaluate the soundscape, and here my comment, based on the recommendations from ISO standard, I would say that from the perspective of everyday living, it is not good. But from the perspective of the sort of artistic situation, performance-like situation, that was a good experience. Of course, we can treat this instruction for listening as a sort of introduction to ear cleaning. The most interesting part was stopping in one place for a while and focusing on different sound sources. After that task, a forest is no longer a quiet place for me indeed, so it opens my perception to the sound. It also could be a sort of trigger for proposals regarding the urban sound design. And suddenly I could hear the swans flying. There was a peculiar sound of the voice from the shore, navigating the canoe, chattering bird on trees. So a person notices also micro types of sounds. The person uses some attributes, some adjectives to describe the qualities of the sounds. I was lacking the sound of some sort of sculpture or device that would react to wind or to amplify the sound, but nothing big. So we could talk about some sort of gradation in the reactions or types of reactions to the instructed listening in the field, from very basic observations, from evaluating the experience as such from the methodological perspective, to heightened attention, to the initiation of some sort of creative thinking. In this open recruitment in Lublin and Łódź, where the members of general population, where the residents participated in sound walks, the qualitative answers were quite obvious, because they clearly evolved around the earlier questions that were the questions within the quantitative approach.
Justina, you now are without a voice. Please, could you make
it
your
also
voice
could be
open.
a sort of
Sorry for the
triggering
interruption.
proposals regarding the urban sound design. And suddenly I could hear the swan's flight.
My micro is on.
There was a peculiar sound of the voice from the shore, navigating the canoe, chattering bird on trees. So
Okay. So there are some locations.
also micro types of sounds. The person
There are some locations.
uses some attributes, some adjectives to
now
describe
again
the
you are
qualities
without
of the
voice.
sounds.
Please let us
And
I
now?
can
know
make
last
the sound of
file.
some sort of
Yes, it's
sculpture or
coming.
device that would react to wind
And now?
or to amplify the
Wonderful.
sound
Can you
of
hear
the
me?
wind.
Yes, wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
Okay, so those are some locations in Łódź and Lublin. As you can see from the perspective of the spatial analysis of the urban space, they are diverse. So there are parts.
We
from
can't see the slides.
evaluating
I'm
the
so sorry.
experience as such from the methodological perspective to heightened
I
attention
hope I do the
to
right thing.
the
Yes.
initiation of some sort of
And we
creative
can now
thinking.
see the slides again.
In
I'm
this open
You
environment
can you see the slides?
not in
where
the
the
moment.
members of general
The
population,
place
where the
is
residents
open for you.
participated in sound walks, the
You
I
can
will
qualitative
I will share
aspects
again.
were quite
we
obvious
have
because
help.
they
Please
clearly
work together.
evolved around the earlier questions that were the questions within the quantitative approach.
The slide is with the photos. The
Yes, the
slides.
slide is with the
Ah,
photos.
wonderful.
Okay. Okay, so I just mentioned, so the places are diverse. They are both the parts of the old city, old squares. There are parks, there are fountains in the open squares. There are intersections between two larger streets. So from the perspective of the architecture, of the influence of the built environment on the sound, participants of the sound walks had the opportunity to experience very diverse soundscapes. But as I said, the responses from the general population were quite obvious, but still people learned how to categorize sounds that they hear and to pay attention to microsounds. So, of course, the reactions were quite obvious in terms of what people liked or didn't like, what disturbed the experience, also the haptic experience, the visual experience, so the multisensory perception of the urban space influence how they reacted to sounds. Some respondents, they used the adjectives, they tried to describe the qualities of sound. Some of them noticed whether the sounds fit to place or don't fit to place. So the earlier questions, the quantitative questions, they directed their attention to certain observations of how the soundscape sounds like, and how the soundscape influences their emotions, their opinions, their vocabulary on what they can hear, see, smell, or touch. Yes, so as I said, some observations were quite obvious with the preferences for the running water, with the observations of children playing in the playgrounds, with the observations of the birds that are lacking at certain moments of the day. People could be perceived as rather disturbing. Some places were perceived as really nice in terms of the visual stimuli, but although those visual stimuli were pleasant, aesthetic, the location of the place nearby the busy street made them unbearable from the perspective of the soundscape. In the case of student soundworks, quite obvious in terms of what people liked or didn't like. Attention to the sound before they go out, so that it produces their heightened attention. And here we have a very nice result of this instruction. Before I starting hike, I began to listen to the sounds and how they work. So we can observe how the horizon of hearing changes. how the person listens to those close sounds of the rustling clothes, of his or her breathing. In this case, it was male. The sounds coming from some other rooms, the sounds generated by people passing by, the micro sounds of elevator, and then the city opens up, and then the person starts to perceive the soundscape of the city. It was very peculiar, but also nice and affirmative to observe how the concepts, the theoretical concept described by Axelson and other scholars were reproduced by using much simpler protocols of listening with calmness and vibrancy of the city perceived within one sound walk, because that's the same female participant. She took a stroll through Park Square, the sounds of wind, footstep, and snow, and then there are stops in the big shopping center and the commercial and touristic place, the Kloczkowska Street. So the musicians playing live, the atmosphere of happiness. So the concepts of the city vibrancy in terms of soundscape, they were nicely observed by the participant. There were many instances where the participants observed how the architectural features of the city, how the landscape features of the city influence the sound. So we can draw a parallel, or we can use a metaphor of the city as a gigantic instrument with the materials used that shape the sound that this instrument produces. I walk inside the monument dedicated to Ratus among the nations in one of the parks in my city, in Łódź. And this person, very sensitive to sounds, oversensitive to sounds actually, experiments with the space and reads out aloud the names of those people who are commemorated by the monument. And he observes how the reverb is produced by the concrete walls. And the same person then observes that what materials we use in order to build roads, build paths, design the parks, influence the sensory experience, including the auditory experience. So the patches made of tree and stamping around on them, jumping from one to another. How the sound changes when we walk faster and slower on different grounds, how various it can be. So the influence of the built environment, but also the influence of the body movement and how the sound is embodied was very nicely observed by the participants. There were many instances of reports where participants reported the regulation of emotions by the sound, even in the places that were familiar to them. There were plenty of reports where the participants reported that usually they use headphones while walking through the city because they do not want to hear the sounds of the city. And now they had to take take off the headphones and listen carefully. Some of them, for various reasons, they had no access to technology, like here, phone battery depleted. So this person had to pay more attention to the sounds around. And it occurred that the stress has been reduced, that there was some sort of relief, some sort of calm, or the conscious listening contributed to the awareness what sounds make me feel good and what sounds make harm to me. So whether I can adjust my paths, I can adjust my routes accordingly.
Christina, one remark, please. You have 2 minutes. Lost
Yeah, sure. Okay.
the right way. Thank
Okay.
you.
another observation that is well that is well grounded in the theory of soundscape. So the gestalt was perceived, the background and the figure. And actually in Nova Huta, the participants were inspired to use some free space on the forms to make drawings. So some of them produced the sort of the visual scores for the city soundscape. One of the person has written down, these songs are not fit for this place, they are the place. Some of them observed how using headphones with microphone helps them to focus on the sounds, how it helps them to imagine the place even if it's dark after dusk, so it's dark. There were some spontaneous instances of mental mapping of the soundscape. And now I would like to present one of the examples of the creative process that has been performed by one of the students. After the soundworks, she composed a short piece inspired by field recordings that she did that presents threat of the Anthropocene. Another observation that is well that is well grounded in the theory of soundscape. So the gestalt was perceived, the background and the figure. And actually in Nova Huta, the participants were inspired to use some free space on the forms to make drawings. Some of them produced sort of the visual scores for the city soundscape. One of the person has written down, these songs are not fit for this place, they are the place. Some of them observed how using headphones with microphones helps them to focus on the sounds. How it helps them to imagine the place even if it's dark, after dusk, so it's dark. There were some spontaneous instances of mental mapping of the sounds. Okay, thank you very much.
Questions from the audience, please. Please, you could use the mic. It would be a little bit further away, but it comes. Please be so kind.
This is Julia Sharman. I was just wondering if you've had contact with the people involved in your research to see if there's been a continued impact on their listening.
Sorry, because I couldn't hear the first part of you.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I just wondered if you'd had any further contact with your participants to find out if they've had a lasting impact from this project.
Not yet, but actually it can be done, because I am in the middle of the project, so I have some other things to perform, but the follow-up is for sure a very good idea.
Other questions? Please
the presentation. I have a question related to the students. What link do they do with their other lectures and with their curriculum at university? How do they see the link between this project you presented and the rest of their education?
Okay. Dziękuję za pytanie. Thank you for your question. In the case of the students from my faculty, from the Faculty of International Political Studies, in general, the course, the module is about the sound in politics, culture, and economics. So we discuss various orientations in the sound studies discipline that link sound with some other disciplines. So students learn, for example, about the analysis of power and violence from the perspective of the political studies, but how can it be, how it can be described by the sound. Of course, there is the whole topic of sustainability and sound studies and acoustic ecology that can inform such modules and such courses, like, for example, the international organizations analysis or the sustainability policies and regional development. For the students that are in the specialization of international economics, the sound and advertising, the sound and branding, that is the area that is of their interest. For students from the Faculty of the Philology, from the Institute of Contemporary Culture, there are students that come to my module from such curricula, like, for example, mass media studies, theatrology, creative writing, and for them participating in such activities is an opportunity to learn about new ways of perceiving reality and using this new modes of perception in their own creative process.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Questions, other remarks, please. We have
Hi,
4 minutes.
this is Celia. I have a question. Is there a reason that you choose autoethnography? Do you have any interesting findings in using these methodologies? Would you share the reason that you choose this methodology in your study? And is there anything interesting through your experiments and collecting all these stories from the participants?
You mean how I would use those results?
Like if you could share like the benefits that you use this methodology, because it's very interesting that you involve this personal stories in your methodologies.
I think that the most, let's say, valuable part from my perspective, although the final product of the project that I carry out now is about the policy of urban soundscape. Is first understand how people perceive the soundscape, how the regular users, how the residents perceive the soundscape, and how they inform narratives about the soundscape. Because if we understand those narratives about the soundscape, it can be and make them more public, or disseminate those narratives. It can be incentive to make this problem more important for the decision makers. So I don't know whether I grasp the idea behind your question.
No further questions? Thank you. Now you see us, perhaps.
Thank you.
But you heard the applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you for this.
One sentence, come on.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to
Make
be
your
with
mic
you.
open. Make mic must be open. Then, otherwise we saw
I
your
have
lips.
I have my mic open.
Yes. I don't know why.
Can you hear me why
Try.
now?
You are not there.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, just a smile. Just a smile from Poland.
Okay.
Yes. Thank
Bye.
you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye. Okay. Bye.
Should I do otherwise? She is out and we are here. Okay. Are there any questions to the whole concept of this afternoon, which we could share with others or which you could transform in other behavior if you are content and lucky? Have a nice afternoon. Thank you very much.